Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Accelerating Toward P2. This is a 4-week webinar series where we're going to explore some pollution prevention strategies in the automotive industry. Today's session is titled Rev It Up, and it will spotlight waste identification and reduction strategies at OEMs and suppliers. My name is Michael Raspberry. I am the Associate Director of the UA SafeState program. And for those of you who are not aware of UA SafeState, we're part of the College of Continuing Studies at the University of Alabama. We have three main groups. We are the state OSHA consultation program, where we provide free occupational safety and health consultations for small businesses in the state of Alabama. We also have a training group that does occupational health and safety and environmental training courses, and we are the OSHA Training Institute, where we actually train the trainers for facilities. And then, I'm Associate Director of the Environmental Program. So our environmental program offers a number of different services, things such as environmental compliance reviews, where we'll go in and work with facilities on all their environmental aspects. We have the environmental accreditation program, where we accredit individuals who conduct asbestos and lead-based paint activities in the state of Alabama. We have a field services component, where we go out and do all manner of testing, whether that's industrial hygiene related or lead and asbestos or mold sampling. We run the state HERA compliance monitoring program. And then also we are the state pollution prevention program. And so that's what we're here today to discuss, are some pollution prevention strategies. And so this P2 program is partially funded by a grant from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. And this basically allows for us to assist facilities that may need technical assistance or training to find ways where they can reduce waste at their facility and save money. And this can be wasted energy or water, or it could be just looking at the hazardous chemicals that we use and find ways or strategies where we can reduce the amount of hazardous materials at our site that ultimately gets wasted and we have to manage. And so the main intent of the program is just to find ways to assist businesses reduce some of these liabilities and save money on their bottom line. And the best part of the P2 program is that it's free. This doesn't cost you anything. These training events are free, and also the technical assistance, where we actually come out and provide a confidential report at your facility, are all free of charge. So if you're interested to learn more about the P2 program and those technical assessments, please reach out to us after the event. A few housekeeping items before I turn it over to today's speaker. All of you guys have been set to mute just to eliminate background noise. However, we are going to monitor the chat box. So if you have a question, type it in the chat box, and we'll make sure that we get that addressed. If we do not are not able to address your questions today, we will follow up with you and make sure that all questions get resolved and answered. Also, just know that this webinar is being recorded, and that we will post it on our website, as well as be sharing it by other means. We also are going to send out a post-webinar survey that will be emailed to you, and we ask that you please complete that survey and kind of let us know how we can improve the program and services. So with that said, without further ado, let me introduce you to today's speaker, who's Miss Ashley Chambers. Ashley is the manager of environmental services with UA SafeState, and as the current board president of the Alabama Recycling Coalition, Ashley is going to share some important information and tips on identifying and reducing waste at automotive facilities. So Ashley, if you'll go ahead and share your screen. I see that you've done so successfully. I'll turn it over to you.
Very good. Thank you so much, Michael. And thank you and welcome to everyone who joined us on the call today. I'm Ashley, and we'll just go on and dive right into today's topic of waste identification and reduction at OEM and automotive supplier facilities. So before the end of today's session, you'll have a basic understanding of P2 and why the automotive sector should care. We'll cover how you can identify waste and list the top waste generating activities at automotive facilities. So there are some tips that I'll go over to put you on the right track. And then at the end, we'll wrap it up with a good discussion of what success can look like once P2 strategies like waste reduction are implemented. Now, just to start it off this way, just the basic definition, P2 is any practice that reduces, eliminates, or prevents pollution at its source. It's also called source reduction. And the opportunities for source reduction, they're often not realized because existing regulations focus mainly on disposal and recycling. But really, if we can just eliminate the waste altogether and avoid it, that's our goal. And that's what pollution prevention is all about. So just to wrap it up with why pollution is important to the automotive industry, everything should go back to this inverted pyramid, if you will, this waste hierarchy where source reduction, it's at the top because it is the most preferred. So today we're going to discuss clean and sustainable production tips. And we are going to talk about the things that come right below source reduction as well, things like reuse and recycling. Very important. And it's common sense. It should be part of your waste practices there at your facility. So again, why is P2 important? For many of you, this is probably obvious, but if you haven't been paying attention, the push for environmental excellence in the automotive sector is a pretty big deal these days. There's a lot of changes going on. And if it's not already happening at your automotive manufacturing facility from corporate, then your internal leaders are probably putting the pressure on your groups to start prioritizing waste and looking for ways to reduce it. So it's safe to say that the focus on waste reduction will only increase. And in fact, pre-pandemic and pre-shutdown and pre the recent supply shortages in the automotive sector, global waste was already expected and determined to increase by 70% within the next 30 years. And think about the way society operates. You know, we're one and done, aren't we? And the automotive industry was already being asked to take a look at producing cleaner and of course moving towards electric vehicles. But besides the changing the design of the vehicles, again, the auto industry, you were already being asked to be less wasteful. And of course, that will only continue. So let's start talking about waste. Let's start by taking a holistic approach. So zooming way out and looking at your complete process from start to finish and bringing in all external and internal players. So kind of taking that 40,000 foot view, let's zoom out. And this is what zooming out can often look like, right? We're not going to go into too much detail today about value stream mapping, but what I will say is this: if your facility utilizes a lean operations process, which it more than likely does, or some version of it, you'll see that finding and tracking waste is pretty similar. And just like tracking a raw material entering into your facility, being processed and leaving the facility as a final product for your customer or final consumer or end user to use, you can use that same technique when tracking waste and finding ways that waste is generated in your facility. So I show this really to share that using a value stream map is a great way to find those exact areas and processes that create the most waste. And furthermore, coupled with your operational process flow diagrams, you can really pinpoint where chemical waste, the small raw bits of waste, are generated. So the takeaway here, value stream mapping is very useful. In fact, just a shared resource, we all have a cell phone close by. I'll give everybody a couple of seconds to pull out their cell phone and you can scan that QR code. Just open up your camera in your cell phone. You don't have to take a picture of it. You just hover it over that QR code and that will take you right to the EPA Lean and Environmental Toolkit. You can also just Google search EPA value stream mapping automotive, and it'll take you directly to the automotive section on the EPA site where it gives you tips on how to build a usable value stream map. And that helps you analyze not just your material line, but again, it is helpful when evaluating and finding how waste is generated at your facility. So once you identify the general location using that value stream map and taking that 40,000 foot view, now we can start to zoom in a little bit, because you truly won't get a picture of what's happening on site until you see it with your own eyes. So I challenge everyone here today, if you're not part of your facility's walkthrough team, or you're not putting eyes on the actual processes going on, this is such a crucial part of actually finding how waste is generated on your site. So set a date, do this regularly, bi-weekly, weekly, whatever works for you. And then I also challenge you to reach out and form a team that takes a look at all processes monthly, or at least quarterly. You should be doing this anyways as part of your environmental walkthroughs. But again, taking that team and literally removing the rose-colored goggles and looking at everything for what it is in the true state, and how employees are behaving around processes. Are they understanding what waste is being generated? Are they handling it properly? Do they even know they're supposed to handle it properly? So again, facility walkthroughs, it's a great way to get a feel for the environmental awareness of your colleagues at all levels, top to bottom. Everybody needs to be a part of this. But really, it's hard to identify waste, or it's hard to reduce waste if you haven't identified or classified it yet. So just a quick waste 101 lesson. We have three major categories we'll discuss today, and you should always keep in the back of your mind or in your mind when you're thinking about waste. You have your non-hazardous. These are the day-to-day regular waste that can be tossed in the dumpster or recycled by conventional ways. You have hazardous waste. These must be labeled, tracked, stored properly, only kept on site for X amount of days, and they can usually be kind of costly to handle depending on what chemicals you're dealing with there. You also may have universal or special waste. I imagine most of you do. These are not always hazardous per se, but they must be tracked, and they're only can be stored on site for X many amount of days or months, and they can be costly to dispose or transport. So again, categorizing these it's so important and crucial to waste identification. And just so you know, all of them need to be reported on. So when it comes to waste, you're never truly off the hook. But these are the three major categories of waste. And waste must be properly identified so they can be tracked and reported. So the takeaway from here is that there is a RCRA hazardous waste determination checklist, and it's a great flow chart, and you have to do it anyways. It's the responsibility of the generator to classify your on-site waste. So if that's you and you have questions, UA SafeState, we're happy to help you with this as part of our P2 evaluation for a facility. But again, we should, and we probably should spend more time on this. So maybe that's another webinar for another day. But the takeaway here is for waste to be properly identified, you need to go through this process to make sure that you're categorizing everything correctly, whether it's non-hazardous, hazardous, or that special waste. So again, by looking at your value stream mapping and your process flow diagrams and walking through those facilities, by and large, here are the top activities that generate the most waste in the automotive manufacturing facilities. And don't worry, there's also, remember, QC and packaging. So there's always waste being generated at all levels. Now, are these all the ways that waste can be generated at a facility? No, of course not. But these are the main activities that we're going to discuss for the rest of our time together today. And these are the ones I really want you to keep in mind and imagine as we're moving through the rest of the presentation. So machining, stamping and welding, injection molding, of course, assembly, surface finishing, lots of waste generated there. And then again, checking the integrity of the product coming in, the raw materials, or if you're a customer, getting materials from another group and then sending them out. That QC, there's a lot of waste that could be generated through there. And then of course, packaging. Oh, packaging. So from these activities, here are the main wastes most commonly encountered at automotive manufacturers and their tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers. So we talked about the pressure and the culture changes coming coming down and pressures to reduce waste. So the number one question that OEMs are asking their suppliers and their assembly teams is, how can we, the royal we, all of us, effectively and responsibly reduce or even eliminate some of these things from our waste stream? So machine lubricants, solvents, paints, scrap metals, plastics, how can we more responsibly reduce or eliminate these? And the reason these are on the list, because sometimes they're the most difficult to deal with. There's some hazardous waste on this list. And from a disposal, from a cost, from an environmental reporting standpoint, these are very common sorts of waste that you'll come across. So we know what kind of activities create some waste from OEMs and suppliers. What do we do next? How do we approach waste now? In short, we follow it from cradle to grave. We perform a life cycle analysis. And the ultimate understanding here is really just to remember that there is no such thing as throwing something away. Away is always somewhere. So every time an item leaves your process or becomes waste, where does it fall? Again, on that waste hierarchy. Are you landfilling everything? Are you just automatically hoping someone else finds a way to recycle it? Or is your group actively looking to reduce your waste, to either rework that waste back into your process to eliminate it, or hey, go back to the very beginning, reverse engineer it to say, we don't even need to use that process anymore. We can update that process and get rid of that waste. So always designed for the end in mind. So taking that cradle to grave approach. And this will be covered on a later webinar as part of this Accelerating to P2 series. We will explore how some groups are implementing an ISO 14001 and putting together a robust environmental management system that couples very, very well with a pollution prevention program. And I also want to mention there are good ways to track waste, and you can either track it on the Excel spreadsheet, just going off of the invoices and manifests alone. That's not always the best way, especially if you're trying to eliminate a lot of paper waste, but some great software that you can use to help track. There's Retrack, there's the EPA WARM model. That's the waste reduction model tool. And that can help you do a full cost accounting. You can enter manifests. You can really evaluate that footprint that you're generating from wastes leaving your site or even before they come on site. So now to some real tips that prioritize P2. Now these may sound really simple at first, but really just start from square one. Look at your waste disposal bill. Track those manifests. Where is the waste leaving once it leaves your facility? You should be tracking it. Your transporters should be providing that to you. Your haulers should be in open communication with you on where everything is ultimately ending up. Again, who is that end user? And if it's a landfill, why is it a landfill? Where is that landfill? And have you evaluated other options, whether it's recycling or reverse engineering, all the way back to the beginning of that process? And I'll say it again, I'll probably say it a few more times before we finish up. There is no such thing as a way. So even if it ends up in a landfill, still the end users and your, as the generator, responsibility that waste ended up there. So some more tips on reducing material use. And I do understand that this is easier said than done sometimes, but really check your inventory. Oversupply can be an issue. And if you've got an oversupply problem, look in the inventory, look really hard at upcoming orders. And the caveat issue, of course, with oversupply or supply in general, there are real supply issues right now in the automotive industry. And that's because of politically, that's just generally what's going on in the world. But again, taking a look at your actual inventory versus what's coming up for you, what's coming up from your customers. We know a lot of changes are coming up. So should you take a look at what you have in storage and find a way to get rid of that, especially if you're never going to use it. From a packaging perspective alone, that generates so much waste, and oversupply can be a real issue. Number two, just looking at the bin. This is really the only way you can look in the bin is when you do those facility walkthroughs, but are you noticing mixed waste? Are you seeing scrap metal tips and plastic nibs and hopefully no liquid waste being needlessly tossed in the trash, but what if you began collecting those items, separating them out, sending them back to the supplier, or finding a recycler for those plastic tabs, for those scrap metal bits? Of course, you should not put chemical waste in the normal garbage. There is a proper way to store that on site safely. But again, checking your processes, checking your employee behaviors. I also want to mention here that you should also, through those facility walkthroughs, you should be checking for leaks and making sure that there's no problems with your actual equipment on site, because obviously that's going to lead to waste issues and other exposures for employees and colleagues, things like that. So one of the things to help you reduce, or really to help you implement a recycling program, I mentioned it briefly there, help start to separate your waste, start to really segment it out, and even looking in the trash cans in the employee areas, or of course in your operational areas, but the break rooms as well, start to get a better understanding of what's actually being tossed. And your facility may need to purchase a baler to handle all the cardboard. It may need to purchase a baler that has a press additive put on to help handle scrap bits that can be pressed down into nuggets or bricks and sent to a recycler. They love it whenever things are already sorted for them and easy to ship, instead of putting them all loose in a bin. Pressing them into bricks can be really helpful for recycling haulers, and they'll pay you for it too, especially if you put in a little bit of extra effort by sorting everything properly. I wanted to mention solder here, removing the hazards, using leadless solder. You can still maintain the integrity of your final product by using less hazardous material. Using less copper in brake pads is another one. That's a case study that we'll take a look at in a bit. One thing here, require green procurement. Everyone else is. So going back to those contract negotiations, not just with your haulers, but with your suppliers and the vendors that are bringing things to you, revisit those vendor requirements and renegotiate contracts when you can. So you may have to bring in legal, your purchasing department, build a green procurement policy and implement that. And it really does help leadership understand the need to identify waste streams and to enforce less wasteful activities there at the plant. So some examples of how that's been utilized for others: require recyclable packaging. And if it's not recyclable, negotiate a return program for a rebate with your vendor or your supplier. So one way companies have done this, automotive industries have done this, they're replacing custom cut polystyrene, which is very hard to recycle in the Southeast. And I'm assuming that's where most of us are on the call from today. But polystyrene or styrofoam, you know, from a volume wise, recycling works the more volume you have, and especially the heavier it is too. Polystyrene doesn't offer much. It squishes down to almost nothing, and it's just hard to find a buyer that actually wants it. But molded cardboard can be recycled, and it's the same kind of benefit. You might pay a little more upfront, but again, what's it worth in the long? It's worth not sending these items to the landfill. It's worth not having to store these items for so long until you have enough to actually find a vendor to take. Got cardboard vendors all over the Southeast that would love that stuff. It's also less cumbersome to deal with molded cardboard over polystyrene. Another example may be to replace wooden crates that have metal brackets on them, so it creates a mixed waste stream with wood and metal. And replace those, require your vendors to ship everything in pallets, plastic totes and metal totes for easy return and reuse. So along with proper identification of chemicals on site, looking at alternatives is helpful as well. So looking for, these are still accepted by industry standards, of course, but fixing leaks, again, we're getting more into water here than actual solid waste, but it can't be overstated. Using drip pans, maintaining these areas is really very important. And you can minimize the waste that's actually going out in your water by taking a look at your plating processes. If you're a finishing and plating facility, take a look at those at your wastewater limits and see what's actually going out. And if you've got a problem meeting those limits, install conductivity meters. Help reduce the amount of waste by using second and third cycle rinses, reusing those. Again, reverse engineering the problem and installing some help upstream, or I guess downstream in the reverse line. Installing sub-meters is also really helpful as well. So that way you know that you're not just looking at the end product. You're not just looking at the water line at the very, very end. So this may not reduce water usage, but it might reduce concentration of chemicals in your process, minimizing degreasing intake by utilizing upstream cleaning processes and reducing that chemical load of that wastewater tank. So application of bio-based materials. You know, years ago, I think a lot of this people thought as pie in the sky suggestions, but they're really not anymore. And bio-based and alternative greener products, they're on the market at a higher rate than ever before. So you can incorporate bio-based interiors, new coatings and bio alternatives, even for tire tubing that meets industry standards. And UV curable paints with low energy options. Paint upgrades are very, very important to your facility, whether it's creating less overspray, which ultimately creates less waste, or moving towards a water and bio-based, that reduces your overall solvent use. Now, getting into training, we mentioned this before with the facility walkthrough, but training is really often overlooked, or it's only utilized when hiring new employees and just kind of checking the box and moving on. But most facilities have an environmental group or a consultant. But are your employees, the actual colleagues down on the floor, and not even just them, but all the way up to the tip top of leadership, up and down the line, is everyone aware of why environmental excellence matters at your facility? So again, I challenge you to create a sense of awareness, not just for environmental, but to participate there in the facility. So engage your colleagues and participate in webinar trainings like this. It will be recorded. We will upload it and you can share it with them that way. But create opportunities for training by putting together short micro learning toolbox talks, focusing on waste reduction, talking about some of the things we did today, that we have today, the little P2 tips, bringing them on facility site walkthroughs, allowing them to understand why it matters that we protect the stormwater at our site, why that dumpster needs to be kept closed, why we need to separate out the little plastic nibs from the cardboard coming off the line, why all of that matters, and understanding that everyone in your facility is responsible for the environmental excellence at your company. So what does success look like and how much does it cost? That's ultimately what a lot of people want to know at the end of the day. Here's some example P2 recommendations and cost savings. These are found on the EPA's website. Again, I love Google. If you Google EPA P2 website and look under the automotive category, you'll find case studies just like these. So we mentioned some of these earlier. Oversupply is a big problem for many facilities. So the recommendation, it seems so simple, but it costs nothing to see the immediate results and success of just managing the stock and ordering minimal packaging. So to do that, you have to review your shipment contracts and your schedules and really get more people involved than just you. Sometimes it is a one-man show to solve the problem, but oftentimes you need to involve your supplier. Everybody needs to be on the same page. And with so much change coming and happening right now, we should all be looking at our contracts anyways to make sure we are still all on the same page. Another example on here is the problem a company had meeting wastewater standards. So they needed to reduce their chemical waste. And again, this was a plating and finishing facility. They needed to update their processes and they installed conductivity meters to gauge contamination levels in the rinse because their levels were too high once they got to the end line. So they needed to rework that. And they reused second and third rinse water in earlier rinse cycles to help those chemical loads go down. And while it took some capital improvement, it took some commitment through new processes that had to be implemented, purchased, and installed, the payback period was not that long. And the takeaway here is take a look at that last column, the waste hierarchy. Ultimately, again, remember, think about that inverted pyramid. You want everything to go back to avoidance, and reuse and recycling is great, but at the end of the day, we want to try to avoid the waste altogether. So implementing some of these P2 strategies really has helped others, and there are more case studies on this on the EPA website to show. We mentioned this earlier, compressing those metal shavings into briquettes and shipping them out that way. It'll decrease your payback period time, but it decreases ultimately how much waste and how much you're spending on disposal when you're able to segment, sort, rework the material back into the process if you can, but having an end user other than the landfill is always our goal. So the takeaway here is when you set a goal through P2 and you identify that you want to reduce waste and you start looking for strategies and you start setting goals and you start building training and an awareness, this is what can happen. It'll benefit your operations in a number of ways, from just reducing your cost and increasing cost savings to meeting goals. Ultimately, you always want to protect your worker health and safety, but you want to meet your legal and environmental regulatory obligations as well. So you'll stay in compliance, or help you stay in compliance. You'll change that workplace culture, and you'll still be maintaining your quality of manufacturing products at a very high level for your customers. So in a workplace culture, we talked about this before when it comes to training, it's not just a plan that's posted in the break room. It's a vast understanding and acknowledgement of your company's environmental goals. So every person's responsible for the environment. And just similar to how these safety groups have created that safety culture at all companies, everyone knows the safety policy and everyone knows why we have a safety policy. But does everybody know why your company has an environmental policy and what their personal role is to play in their day-to-day activities at the office? So there's lots of ways to engage at all levels, but implementing P2 strategies really does create a workplace culture that emphasizes and celebrates environmental excellence. So we finished in great time today, and that was a very quick overview on waste reduction. But what do you do now? So right now, think about what your goals are for this quarter or this year. Do they involve waste reduction? Do they involve water usage? Do they involve energy usage? Do we need to help you take a look at your wastewater processes and surcharge? What are your goals? So again, I challenge everyone to start with those facility walkthroughs and start setting goals. Look at your cost of disposal, look at those utility bills. And for some facilities and environmental teams, even if you have a consultant, this can all be a bit overwhelming. But that's where a group like UA SafeState, like Michael mentioned earlier, that's where this P2 program fits in perfectly, especially with the automotive industry right now. So we have a free P2 program that comes into play here, and particularly for those tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers and the major OEMs. However, we want to work with any industry and we want to help everybody. But as Michael mentioned before, the P2 program, there's no catch, there's no cost, and there's no obligation to implement any recommendations we make. We might just come through and do a great facility walkthrough and help you set goals, and maybe that's it. But the P2 implementation and the recommendations report that we generate, that's an internal document to you. We don't send that to anybody else. And it's really a lot of fun for our team and our students to learn more about the processes that are going on here in our state and regionally. So if energy efficiency, water conservation, chemical usage, waste reduction, taking a look at those P2 tips we discussed today, we can look at other things too. Please give us a call. And I talked about the QR code earlier. With your phone, hover that over that QR code there, or there's the quick link to our alabama-safestate.ua.edu/pollution prevention. That's our website, and we want to work with you. You'll be working with Michael, myself. We have a whole team, and we are anxious to learn more about your facility to help you any way we can in meeting your pollution prevention goals. So with that, Michael, did we have any questions come in I want to honor everybody's time, but I also want to make sure that we're allowing enough time for questions and discussion.
Well, that was great, Ashley. Thank you for that information. I know everyone in attendance heard that message loud and clear, and we'll look at their processes a little closer to implement some of those important tips that you shared with us and work to change the culture at their facility. We did have a couple of questions, and so the first one that we can get to is, what's the best way to connect with recycling haulers in Alabama?
That's a very common question, and it's one that I'm happy to take the load on. The Alabama Recycling Coalition is a very active group in the state of Alabama. So my contact information is on the screen. I am the current board president for the Alabama Recycling Coalition, but we have active members and just a plethora network and a lot of knowledge in regards to scrap metal, scrap plastics of all kind, even that polystyrene. We've got connections in Atlanta. That's the closest you get for styrene, but cardboard, fiber products, even wood products. There's a lot of ways to divert waste from landfill. Everyone calls it recycling. It's ultimately waste diversion or reworking it back into somebody's process. But yes, please contact me. There's my email on the screen, and I'll be happy to connect you with haulers of all sorts to help you meet your needs at your facility.
We had one other question that we can get to today during this time, and that's, will a P2 assessment help my facility perform a waste characterization?
I think we can. Yeah, that is part of our facility assessment, is helping a company, helping a group examine all their waste coming into and out of, again, taking a closer look at their goals, what their ultimate goals are there. But yes, if they have not completely characterized the waste and gotten a full picture of what's actually on site, yes, the UA SafeState team definitely help with that.
All right, well, great. Well, I would like to thank you all for attending today's webinar. You see on the screen the contact information for myself and Ashley. And so our team at UA SafeState looks forward to working with you. So please don't hesitate to contact us for assistance regarding P2 strategies or compliance issues, or if you want a facility assessment conducted. Also, here are the next 3 webinars in this 4-week series. Please just come back with us next week, where we're going to explore how to implement ISO 14001 at your facility, and also how to help define environmental objectives and help prioritize P2 strategies for those who do have the ISO 14001 environmental management system or another environmental management system. So please just help us spread the word and invite colleagues to attend these Lunch and Learn webinars. Free, and are here just to assist you and help your environmental program and help reduce waste and hopefully save you some money. So again, I thank Ashley for the great